I am so glad you're here. This morning, I did something that I don't usually do. I clicked on an ad that basically said 7 minutes a day, get yourself in shape. Now, I'm a little overweight. Well, more than a little, like just on the bottom line of being obese. And I have a thyroid issue, and I put on weight if I take in much more than maybe 1,000 or 1,200 calories a day. So, I want to live to 100. I'm 80, and I want to live to 100 because I got so much more to say. But it was interesting. I clicked on this ad this morning, and it said, well, tell me about yourself, basically, and what do you weigh and how tall are you? It said you're obese. Yeah, I knew that. And it went on to say, how much exercise do you get? Well, I walk 3 times a week. It's a little less than an hour. Well, it's more than less than it's about an hour that I go walking. And that's my major exercise, plus doing construction kinds of things around the house. Wendy shovels the snow and so on. Anyway, I go through this whole thing. At the end, it says you could be down to the 195 right now. You could be down to 180, 181 by the end of March if you follow my plan. And so I said, well, that's interesting. So I click through and I say this, that, the other thing, and then it asks for the money. It asks for the money. They always ask for the money. And I suspect that they're overpromising, and certainly most people who buy underproduce because they don't actually follow through on the exercise plan, whatever the plan is. And I'm not sure I would follow through on the plan, but I'm not sure it's worth the money because I already know more about what I should be doing than what I have been doing. Anyway, that's just a little rant on off the beginning here. But today we're going to deal with something that it is indirectly applicable today. We don't have a religion versus religion today, as they did then. We had in the New Testament times. Oh, I should mention, yeah. This is what we're doing. We're going through the training of the 12 with A.B. Bruce and picking up on every chapter. And this chapter this week is actually a smaller chapter. And I'm going to throw in more of my own rants as I go and less of the some come in here. Thing important. Okay. I just wondering if it was saying that somebody telling me that I didn't have the mic or something. Where was it? Okay, so I want to deal with the issue that's underneath the issue that Bruce deals with. Now, let me reiterate, Breakthrough Pathways is about getting people started at the beginning and taking them up. When we're doing this broadcast and this particular thing on YouTube and then on Spotify, it is designed for the people who are further up the ladder to find ways and means to get into the smaller people. The book was written in 1870. It's a classic, and it's we're redoing it in modern English, and then I'm adding my own stuff on anyway as we go. So that just gives you a little sense of what's going on here. And we're going to start today with this issue.
The church is at a crossroads. Attendance is down, communities are disconnected, and many wonder what's next. At Breakthrough Pathways, we believe the answer isn't in more programs or professionals, it's in you, ordinary people making a real difference.
So I live every AM for real conversation, real solution, and a renewed vision for the future of the church. Let's build something that lasts. Subscribe today and be part of the breakthrough.
So the whole deal here, whoops, I clicked the wrong button, but that's okay. I'm over the side. I see that now. And I'm working on this. It's kind of two monitors going on here. And my slides
The
kind of
church
show
is
up.
at a
If I do the right thing, my slides will show up. But I got to get my mouse over into the correct, there we go, into the correct box. I have to click on that monitor over there. Never mind. That's my problem, not your problem. Okay, so in this whole business of Jesus and the rituals that they face, the religion of the day that the disciples came out of, and they were criticized by the standard religion. Now, we looked at the business of fasting, and Jesus said, well, we could take it or leave it. Last week, that was last week's program. Go back and watch it if you haven't seen it, because there's some conclusions there that will be really useful for you. Today, we're looking at ceremonial washings. Next week, we'll look at observing the Sabbath. Now, the Sabbath is quite interesting because while, this is a little digression, but in the Old Testament law, there's moral law, and there's civil law, the organization of the society, and there's ceremonial or religious rituals. And we have to sort things out. If you go through the book of Leviticus and you see, for example, what happens if you commit adultery, you're supposed to be killed. And we see that as the organization of the civics in that day. And even though the adultery carries forward because it's re-spoken in the New Testament and clearly a moral issue, the other sides of it aren't there. So Jesus is trying to say, look, guys, it's a whole new day here. Did it in Aramaic, and, as he spoke to the disciples, and it was recorded in Greek. Isn't that an interesting thing? But that's another digression. Okay, so next week we'll get to this business of the Sabbath, but this week we're going to jump off on rituals. Now, I want you to understand that rituals aren't necessarily all bad. There are tremendous benefits to having rituals. I get a little frustrated when people say they're not into organized religion. And I say, you tell me what's not organized. It's organized as how you drive on what side of the road you drive on. And education's organized, and business is organized, and family has to be organized or you won't eat. So what do you mean organized religion? What you mean is I don't want anybody to tell me how to live because it's between me and God. No, it's more than that. It's between me and God for sure, but it's also between me and others in the society, and in particular, others within the framework of the church. Now, as Jesus was speaking, you got to bear in mind that there's this emerging group of disciples. He picked 12 to be close with them. 3 are the inner circle, 70 that he ultimately sent out, but there were others who probably came and went and traveled with him from time to time and place to place. And they used some of the existing rituals in the Jewish system and some of the traditions, but they left others aside. Now, what had happened was that the people from the original religion were saying, that's not right. They're not doing the right thing. They're not fasting. They're not washing their hands, not observing the Sabbath properly. And they were very critical. Now, that's not all bad because they had a sense of community. And Jesus spoke into that synagogue-oriented community of the New Testament times. And so he had to be careful with saying, this is how we move from where you are to where you go. But they did have a sense of community and wanted to preserve that community. We do the same thing today with our communities. We have standards and rules, and whether it's a team or whatever it is, you have to wear the team uniform or you can't play on the ice. It's some things that are pretty good about developing a sense of community. It gives a direction, a meaning, a purpose. It certainly can give you the kind of comfort and support you want, this inner sense of being buoyed up by things that that are good. We fought in this last generation a lot about the music. And I confess to you that I still am stirred more by old style music than new style music. But that doesn't mean it's better or worse. My comfort comes from that which was familiar to me and what I grew up with and what I particularly immersed myself in Southern gospel music when I was a teenager, because we were the wannabe Blackwood brothers. We traveled from church to church and it was fun, but we also were trying to do something good for people. And I think as a bunch of high school students, we probably encouraged some people. And they smiled and nodded. And as I look back on it, we weren't that bad, but we weren't that good. And those people were gracious and they were loving to us. And even if it wasn't their kind of music, because their kind of music was from the 1940s and wherever it was from, they were willing to set that aside and let us do our music, even in our home church from time to time. So eh, they were forward looking, and that brought comfort to me at the time and support and kept me in the game of following Jesus. And so, rituals can give you a sense of moral guidance in life. And they actually, if you have rituals that are kind of shorthand in your brain for what you do next so you don't have to think about it. That, by the way, is one of the things that makes church starting so challenging, because everything you do the first time is the first time you've done it in this context. So you have to rethink things, and that's a lot of work. But it's also good because you get to rethink things and maybe do things a little differently than they did in the mother church or in the other church that people came from. When you have rituals or control systems in your life, it reduces your stress because you know what to do next. When Wendy and I have breakfast together, I usually get up before she does, and if I'm not sitting there working at the computer, I know what the rituals are, what things I take out of the fridge, and what takes things I take out of the cupboards, and what vitamin pills I put out there, and I can think about other things while I'm doing it. So ritual habits are not all bad. They give you a time, since they're kind of brainless sometimes, of doing some self-reflection or thinking about where you're going to go for the rest of the day. So there are some good things about rituals, about organized religion, if you would. It could be personal and it could be religious as well. But there are liabilities if the rituals go run amok. They can demonstrate rigidity and being overly dogmatic about things that really don't matter. There is potential to use them to hammer down on people and create abuse. We have things that went away a long time ago. We don't have to do them anymore. They foster sometimes unnecessary and unuseful compulsive behavior and give people an ineffective way of coping with the problems in life. So there's something to be said for ritual, but it has to be thought through. And that's what Jesus was doing in the whole new day that he developed. So there was a major shift going on in religious thinking, and that was awkward and difficult for some. There was a moving on from Old Testament laws and rituals that had been developed around that series of actions that were performed according to the prescribed order and so on. And Jesus is saying that the core issue really has to be what's in the heart, not what's in the ritual. And you got to look past the outside. That's why we have to be bound by love. Not what does ritual demand, but what does love demand? And we need to suck it up sometimes and kind of plug our ears and hold our nose and cover our eyes. If we can't find the sin in it, then away we go. And, I experienced a lot of things down through my life where people were positive, especially when we were starting churches. They would say, why not? And in the existing churches where we worked, they said, no, like it that way. I remember I went to preach in one church that's now subsequently shut down, big, beautiful auditorium. There were maybe 60 people there, and the church was on the way down. It was going to die. The pastor asked me to come in and preach for 3 weeks. And I asked the people to sit in a different place next Sunday when they came. Nobody did. The elder of the church, the key guy, a man who was highly respected and godly man, he didn't move. I asked him, just move up one pew, just one pew next week. And he didn't move in 3 weeks. And that church never survived because those habits, those rituals that were comfortable to them for some reason, the one pew was more comfortable, the one that made it the same wood and the same style and the same shape, just 3 feet closer to the platform. He wouldn't do it. And that happens in churches, and those churches are in danger of dying. So we've got to get down to the matter of the heart. Now, Jesus redefined the whole business of how this works about eating things, the wrong things, and doing the wrong things is not what goes in, but what comes out that makes the guy wrong. So he set aside the dietary restrictions and the ritual washings. Now, this wasn't washing for cleanliness, as we understand it. It's very important today. It was a ritual. The true purity is that it comes from the heart. Now, he takes the Pharisees down, and I don't think he was likely in a condescending, nasty tone. He's saying, look, you set aside the laws of God by some of the things that you did. this concept of korban. It was the idea of taking something and saying it's dedicated to God. And by saying it was dedicated to God, it wasn't useful for taking care of their own family needs with their parents. And Jesus talked about that as being a breaking of what was fundamental. Honor your father and mother, so it'll go well with you in your life. So that illustration demonstrated that there was a challenge of authority, Pharisees challenging Jesus' authority, Jesus challenging their authority, and Jesus fearlessly confronted the situation. And that's so important for us to understand that whatever situation we're facing, we can be patient. I'm saying don't be patient. Should not be nasty. I slip into nastiness so easily, and I have to be very careful that I don't. But fearless confrontation, and you have to strip out the complexities. So I remember one situation where a youth pastor wanted to bring in this band, and he brought in this band from over there. And it cost big bucks, and I insisted that he go and raise the money exterior to the youth budget that he had, and he did. It was quite a significant amount of money. And he was going to fill the auditorium with 600 people, which is the maximum you can ever hold. I think he got about 100. I guess he was over-expecting. This is often true. And the band did their thing. It wasn't my kind of music. But another pastor friend of mine came, and we were standing there in the lobby listening to them do their music, and the kids were so enthralled with the music. And it really was good in terms of the content of the words. And these were fine-hearted young people, but they were doing rock music. This is back in the 90s. And I remember turning to my friend John and saying, where's the sin? Where's the sin? And there was no sin, so it was okay with me. But, moving their stuff in and out, they actually scraped all those big boxes on the carpet and left a mark. Oh, man, did I take on the chin for that? The mark on the carpet mattered more than whether or not it made a difference to the spiritual life of 100, 125, 200, I don't know, teenagers. That's so difficult. You've got to find a way to strip out the complexities that sneak in on us in life. No. That's what Jesus was doing, defending his disciples for not washing their hands because they were just excited probably about the conversation they're having with Jesus and about getting on with it. It wasn't a rebellious, let me stick it in your face and prove that I can. There was no evidence that they were being rebellious. They were dealing with issues of the heart, and the issues that were on the surface ceased to matter to them so much. So you want to be like Jesus? Well, don't flinch, but then don't be nasty. Use specific examples like Jesus used the example of Corbin. You could pick up an example like the one that I just used, but you got examples from your own life about how people put the minor things as the major things, and you can expect some pushback from time to time and controversy. And, it's not useful, in my opinion, for you to try to authoritarianly, is that a word, to impose your will on the church. I don't think that really helps at all. You need a slow evolution where you teach the principles kind of by the way as they come up. Not where you say, I have a bone to pick with you and here's my lecture for you, but where you actually think through things that matter in the life of the church. So now what? What are you going to do about it? Taking that Old Testament law and moving it forwards. There are two things you have to be aware of. And Bruce didn't talk about these things. These are just my pea-sized brain. You have to understand that so often people are operating out of cognitive bias. You look at them. People are working out of rationalization. Well, if you do it this way, it'll achieve that other thing. It'll be bad because of so and so and such, when in reality, they just don't like it. So I want you to understand how important it is for all of us to move. Where am I here? With slides? Where's the without the slides? I don't want it without the slides. Turn the slides on. There we are. I want you to understand how important it is to understand the world in which we find ourselves and to evaluate yourself. When you see somebody standing firm on something they ought not to stand firm on because it's not principial, it's not of the core of the matter, then you've got to deal with these situations properly. You've got to recognize that you have your set of cognitive biases. So do I. And when somebody says, I don't like this or that or the other thing, they have biases that they've established. You can't fully understand their biases without exploring it with them and asking instructive questions, not accusative questions, not being Dr. Phil and saying, what were you thinking? But saying, now, explain to me how you drew that conclusion. I see. So the principle behind that is you want to honor God. Well, right? We are on the same page there, or whatever it might be. And you got to sift through these cognitive biases. I'm going to teach you how to figure out what they are in a moment. And on top of that, you got to look carefully at your own rationalizations. I've run into situations where I find out later what the reasons were. Why we need to change this date from the board meeting from this to that because it's more convenient for the other guy and actually because it's less convenient for the person who wanted to change it, things like that. Watch for those rationalizations, the one you make yourself. Back in the day, we gave up on Sunday evening services. I always resisted that. And the argument was, we need to have more family time together. It's like, God gave you 6 days of the week to have your family time and 1 day to set aside for rest and worship. And not like Sunday evening service mattered, but to say we need more family time is to say we need less God time. And it didn't make sense to me at all. And the reality was people just didn't want to prepare for the Sunday evening service. And they didn't want to come out because they wanted to watch whatever was on television on Sunday evening and sit there and eat their munchies while they were watching something that their kids weren't even interested in. It wasn't family time. It was lazy time that drove me nuts. They wanted to give up the ritual with rationalization, not with real reasons. And I want you to understand these things and look at them. So this is what I'm going to tell you. And I can't tell you specifically because by the time you watch this, it will change. Change is coming rapidly upon us with artificial intelligence. And I found ways learn to use Google. At least I hope you did. Google search. There's something way better than that. It's the pieces of artificial intelligence that you can use for yourself to help you understand things and maybe to help others understand things. So, for example, you can go to an AI platform, give you some clues on what's available at this moment, but it'll be different by the time you watch this, if you watch it a year from now. And you just say, write me an article with bullet points on such and such as a subject on rationalization. And then it'll come up with something, and then you can ask it, so what are the good things about rationalization and what are the bad things? You can go on to say, tell me more about this thing that you're a little fuzzy on, and it will give you more and more stuff. Now, if you want to do quick work, you go to gemini.google.com. Gemini, you'll find it anywhere. And ask it a quick question. It'll give you a really quick answer. If you want the most complete platforms at this time are Claude.ai, which does very good writing, and ChatGPT, which is better than it used to be, and it's improving all the time. And the paid version of ChatGPT is very powerful and useful. But if you want to do it cheap, free, go to deepseek.com. Now, again, these things are going to change. I wouldn't recommend you go to Grok. It does bad work. I wouldn't recommend you go to Meta. It does bad work, in my view. Less effective, maybe not bad, but less effective work. But go to deepseek.com. You get a free account. You just log in and you ask it anything about these things that you're stirred up about. And if you want to help somebody overcome a particular problem in their life, you might say to deepseek.com, how can I help a person overcome obsessive compulsive behaviors in their life? Oh, you don't know what obsessive compulsive behaviors are? Give me a quick summary of what compulsive, break that word. Those behaviors are. It can do that for you. It's amazing what artificial intelligence will do. Now, going forward, the artificial intelligence is going to maybe surpass human intelligence. Bill Gates is worried about that. And if he's worried about it, we should be worried about it. But that's tomorrow. We can live for today. We can use the powers of things today and be careful that you don't get caught in a new sense of rituals of relying on things that you shouldn't rely on. Okay, so whether they wash their hands ceremonially didn't matter. We know now that it mattered in terms of the cleanliness, but that's a different thing. Bruce, in discussing it, is doing it in the context of actually 3 chapters. I'm calling this chapter 8. It's chapter 7 in here, 3 parts. But he's talking about this as being freedom. So the title that I chose for today's presentation was being free from rituals that we can set aside, that I don't have to do them for their own sake, but bound by love. And I would say that it's so important that you ask yourself every day when you're dealing with somebody and you're feeling that isn't quite right and I want to push back on them. Ask yourself, what's the loving thing to do in this context? And hold yourself back and your own preferences, your own rituals, your own presuppositions, your own superstitions, your own rationalizations. Hold them back so that you can help people. Now, that's up at run 6 on the ladder. That's what you got to learn to do and be good at it. And I can tell you right now that the people on run 1, I watched my tongue last night. They won't go where it was supposed to go. At run 1, they have their own sets of rituals and habits, and they don't even know it. And so when you demonstrate that you're willing to be adaptable, it's being a demonstration to them that maybe they could be adaptable and get involved with other people and find out that it's all about how we relate to God, but much more how we relate to others, because that's what God demands. So we'll catch you next week. I really want you to come back, and I hope everything is going extremely well.